Hello again, and so we move to the Brain Bash item 2. To thine own self be true, and to hold fast at the darkest hour. Shape to fit, the matter of conformity, isolation, aloneness, and to be unmutual. Yes, it is a change of mind. I've chosen this because I knew the author, Roger Parks, quite well. And in fact, he and his wife came to our wedding. And it's worth saying that the term unmutual, actually, I found out where it comes from. It comes originally from Stalin's Russia, the USSR, where Stalin, who was a real tyrant and responsible for the murder of millions of his own people, he ruled by fear, and people who he took a dislike to became unpersons, and they disappeared without trace in every way, including being taken out of photographs, out of everything that was printed. And of course, Roger latched onto that, knew about it, so he just made it, instead of unperson, unmutual. So here we go. This, incidentally, is one of the chapters of my book that comes out around about 13,000 words. This is a heavyweight episode. It signals a turning point. This will be the last conventional story. After this, the final 5 will mark a significant departure from the format we have become accustomed to. This is the bleakest, the grimmest, and the most melancholic of all the 17 chapters that comprise the prisoner's journey, from resignation, imprisonment, through all his trials to his eventual escape, if indeed he does escape. Perhaps in tone, a change of mind might compare to the concluding scenes in Free for All, where the scent of victory by the prisoner over the village is so emphatically dashed as he is crushed physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Yet, when all appears lost at the darkest hour, here the prisoner outwits his captors and seizes an emphatic victory, his opponent, a calculating number 2, reaping a bitter harvest. For all its stark and sombre atmosphere, this episode is one of the richest in the series, augmented by some of the most powerful images yet seen. Mind-bending drugs, Pavlovian conditioning, brainwashing, social manipulation, conformity, the role of the rebel in society, the intolerance for an individual who is outside the herd mentality. A change of mind can very much be seen as allegorical in nature. Orwell's seminal prophetic novel, 1984, is clearly an influence, as is Richard Condon's novel, The Manchurian Candidate. The show trials with their public confessions of both the West, Senator Joe McCarthy's communist witch hunts of the late 1940s through to the mid-50s, and the East, Stalin's purges of the 1930s and Mao Zedong's Chinese Cultural Revolution, which was then current, with nods to Ken Kesey's 1962 novel, later made into a film, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, are all reflected and referenced. And all of these are essentially secondary to the 2 driving interlaced plot threads: the lobotomizing of our hero in tandem with his alienation from society. The prisoner is banished, an outcast, isolated and shunned by both warders and prisoners alike. As in The Schizoid Man, here the village's regime planned hinges upon a clever deception. Yet Despite all the travails the prisoner endures, he emerges triumphant. A scoring system, I call it the bariometer. 5 stars, 5 out of 5, but actually only 4.5, because being both so claustrophobic as well as studio bound, combined with a plot that is very bleak and sombre, we yearn for a ray of sunshine, a Portmeirion that is sun-washed. Definitely an episode that requires considerable exploration and consideration of the ideas and the question it poses. The script is elevated by McGowan's direction. There is a school of thought that actually thinks this is one of McGowan's favoured 7. Certainly George Markstein thought it was exactly what the series should be about. He raved over it. So now to the points to ponder. Number 1, conformity. The issue of conformity runs like a thread through this series, but nowhere else is it so powerfully portrayed than in this episode. From an early age, each of us learns that safety lies in conforming. We can all remember how to be seen to be different carries penalties, to be considered weird, to risk ridicule, to stand out from the crowd. The question is, does it take courage to be an individual, true to ourselves? Or is it easier and safer just to follow the herd? Scaling the following countries in order, in which might you experience the greatest or least personal freedom to be yourself, and why? North Korea, and not far away from it, is a mountain kingdom called Bhutan, which is the only country in the world to put gross national happiness above gross national product. So it's neither communist nor capitalist. It falls in between. It takes a very different individual route. The United States and Cuba. Well, there's arguments both for and against both, actually. In the World Happiness Index, the United States out of 180 countries comes something like 154th, because although materially it's well off, there are many other factors which mean that if you can't keep up, you fall by the wayside. Russia, Switzerland. How about the United Kingdom and China? Which would you think is the best to live in, and why? In the 1960s, there was a very famous psychologist called Ronnie Lang, R.D. Lang, who was incredibly influential, and at the height of his fame was as popular as the Rolling Stones. So according to him, he wrote several books, madness can be interpreted as non-conformity to a particular environment. How do we treat our non-conformists? In Understanding the Prisoner, a course at DePauw University, Indiana, administered by Professors Jason Fuller and our very own 61 member Valerie Ziegler, in relation to this episode, they write, some physicians practiced lobotomies in the mid-20th century as a form of mental health therapy, or as a form of social control of unruly individuals. I did some research on this, and lobotomies were practiced almost production line in the 1930s and 40s, and essentially they destroy people's minds. They're now banned, thank God. Ken Kesey, who wrote the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he based his book on, he was a nurse on the night shift in a hospital that dealt with people who were there because of supposed mental illness, and really he came to see they just thought differently, yet these people were lobotomized, and it destroys the personality. So to continue with that, Lang demonstrated successfully that individuals who might otherwise be institutionalized because they did not conform to perceived conventional behavior could be reintegrated into society. Can an individual conform and still retain their cherished individuality? Can we both be a recalcitrant rebel and a conforming citizen? Is this episode an accurate reflection, a metaphor of our society? And if so, what can we learn from it? So yes, still discredited, lobotomies were looked upon as a solution for many mental illnesses. But the question I ask is, have antidepressant drugs taken its place? 1 in 4 people in England, that is nearly 12 million people, are taking addictive prescription medicine such as antidepressants, sleeping pills and opioid painkillers. The antidepressant prescription rates have increased from 15.8% of the population in 2015 to 16.6% in 2017. The highest prescribing rates are in areas with the greatest social deprivation. The source is the NHS. In America, according to one study of the Journal of the American Medical Association, 1 in 6 citizens take antidepressants long term. So really, when you think about it, if we live in a society where we're so heavily dependent on antidepressants, what does that say about the society that we live in? And what can each of us do about it? How do we label others that we do not agree with? We might say that they're antisocial, uncooperative, strange, weird. Instead of just accepting, they think in a different way to us and have a different personality. Consider those with autism or Asperger's syndrome. How do we tolerate them? I like to think better than before. Remember when the disabled were hidden away? Perhaps as a human race, we are making some progress. What do you think? I researched brainwashing, and it actually comes from a Chinese expression which translates as cleansing of the mind and was coined back in the early 50s. So it's tempting to think that brainwashing involves changing personal beliefs, behavior, or values. In fact, the process requires the subject undergo mental turmoil and self-doubt, convincing the individual that in fact their position is contrary and violates their own values. They should then feel guilt, at the same time being led to new ways of seeing themselves in the world. So really, it's actually more akin to conversion with a new set of beliefs instilled. Apart from the use of this technique in the Korean War, can you think of anywhere else in peace or war where it's been employed? Was it employed, for example, in the American media prior to them entering the Second World War? Because in the 30s, they were determined not to get involved in any further world wars. So, for example, might it be something that a government or a religious cult might employ? Or sections within the media? Might it be used to prepare a nation to agree with the government's course of action? There is a film made in 1960 in this country starring Richard Attenborough called The Angry Silence, which I would recommend highly, where you can see brainwashing in action. And also, if you type in the website for the Imperial War Museum, IWN, there's a documentary drama made way back starring Alan Doby that it's been on Talking Pictures channel, and it is about a dramatization of what happened to the soldiers who were captured by the Koreans and how they were brainwashed. Sometimes this is British soldiers, but there were times American soldiers within days of being captured started issuing propaganda in favor of communism, and in fact many soldiers stayed behind and refused to return. They had been turned so much. So there we are. Thank you for watching.